Thanks for being amongst the first ones to arrive. It's always nice. So we'll go ahead and get started here. I appreciate everyone being on time. As I said, this is the Tracing Success Patterns webinar. I call it Tracing Success Patterns because I've had a lot of failure patterns in my life and a lot of success patterns. And what I want to try to convey today is a number of those success patterns. Um, Many of you would have seen this particular ad ahead of time, that some of those techniques I've been able to use to persuade Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Steve Jobs to get involved and do what I needed them to do. And that really brings me to kind of the core of what we're going to talk about today, which is the ability to get what you need. I put this up as the initial slide on the presentation because my bold promise today is that that you can double your ability to get what you need. And so what is that worth? You know, in a business setting, it's probably easily worth 5,000 plus, if you're in sales, obviously it's worth way more than $5,000 because you're doing those transactions. But really, no matter what role you have in business, if you can help your company get what it needs, that will benefit you. Or if you can just improve your salary, that's something that you might need, where persuasion would come into play. So clearly 5,000 plus is probably what we would benefit from if we could just double what we need, double our ability to get what we need. And then there's the question of what we would pay for it. My belief is that you would pay at least $100 for it. And so I wanted to just take this $50 bill here. I looked around for a $100 bill, but this is what it's worth to me to have you pay attention to this presentation today. That's $50. We'll move on to this $50 here. So I really appreciate you coming. It cost me a third amount of advertising dollars to get you here. The goal of this, tearing this apart here, is to just get you to stay. Because if you make it to the end of this presentation, you'll have access to either $5,000 worth of benefit or at a minimum $100 worth of benefit. So I hope you hang in there. My bold promise for this presentation is really just that there's a breakthrough that's possible for you. As I talked about the ability to double your ability to get what you need, it's really about techniques. And I think of them really as little persuasion inventions. You know, here we have this caveman frustrated because he hasn't quite invented the wheel yet, or the particular wheel he has is not working that well. And it's a little bit different with persuasion. Every single person on this call is really already an expert at persuasion. Persuasion starts very early in our lives. When you're a baby, before you had any conscious thoughts, you know, if you needed something, you were hungry or you needed your diaper changed or whatever, you would start crying. And eventually that cry would get louder and louder. And that's really the first step of all persuasion, is getting the attention of the people that you need to help you out. The next part is visualization. So you want to be able to show this person kind of what it is you need, and so I won't get into the visualization of changing a diaper, but clearly that's part of what we need to do, is to make the person that we now have their attention. We want to give them a visualization of either the problem or the solution, and that really gets to the two next parts in persuasion, is the need and the and satisfying the need. So the need, you know, if you're a mom or dad and your kid is crying, you need to get back to sleep. You need him to not be doing that anymore. You know, if you so you have basic needs, and you also have just the need to believe that you're a responsible parent who would take care of their child. So those are the needs. The way to satisfy the need is to give the child what they want. So, you know, when I was a little baby crying in the crib, I wanted, I wanted to be fed. I wanted to have my diaper changed, whatever it might be. Those are and the person that I'm trying to convince is a person who has enormously more power over me. So how do as I have to in some way persuade that person who has more power in the negotiation than I do, that it's worth their while to go ahead and do that. And so finally, there's the ask, okay, well, let's go ahead and do the thing that I'm asking you to do. And that's that 5-step process, basically, of attention, visualization, need, satisfaction, and the ask. That's one aspect of persuasion. When we get into the story about how I convinced Bill Gates to invest in my company, I use those same exact techniques that I've been practicing ever since I was a little baby. And There's actually one that comes after that, which we'll talk about in just a minute. So essentially, my promise is you're going to double your ability to get what you need. Now, why? So what's my request? So my request really is that you will ignore all of those naysayers out there. There's a lot of people who will tell you that, oh, you can't really get better at something, or it's not worth your trouble, or if there's a payment involved, you shouldn't pay that. Everything's a scam. There's no way these things could really work. If it was so easy, you'd already know how to do it. There's a bazillion naysayers, or it wouldn't work for you. You can't think fast enough in the situation that you're in to come up with the right thing to say. You've never been good at sales. These are all the naysayer voices that are out there. And what's especially challenging is sometimes that naysayer voice is in your own head. And relates to maybe past times when you try to get what you need and you were just not effective at it. And so what I want you to do is just kind of go along with me, just ignore all those naysayers. I understand that, in the cartoon on the left, it says, "Are you coming hunting or you sit around here all day inventing?" So you got the naysayers there standing around with their spears. And what you have a chance to do is take advantage of something I've invented here, which is a system for getting what you want. And, that process of getting what you want is really one of, it's been around for a long
You
time.
can't always get what you
Mixed version of
want.
it. I can't promise you're
You
going to get what you
try
want.
sometime. Well, you might just find what you need.
And that ability to get what you need, that really requires becoming an expert in persuasion. Now, there's a challenge. If you become too much of an expert in persuasion, you now have this ethical dilemma of, am I going to use this persuasion skill set that I've developed? Am I going to use that for good or for ill or evil, good or for evil? And it's not, if you get to the point where you can persuade people to do something, especially people that you've just met, then you have all the skills that it takes to turn from persuasion to manipulation. Manipulation is when you get someone to do what you want that's not good for them, but is good for you. And so every con man, confidence man, that's why they call it a confidence man, con man. Every con man has mastered these persuasion skills, but they've used them for the evil form of persuasion, which is manipulation. So we don't want to do that. We want to use persuasion. I like the term persuasion better than manipulation, because persuasion to me means you're getting something you want, fine, that's good, but the other person is also getting something they want, that's good for them. So, for instance, when you're selling a product, if you know the product will be good for the person, then you can ethically sell that product and exercise your advertising skills to try to get them to buy that product, because you know that if they use that product, they'll be better off. And so that's the ethical way to use persuasion. And we'll talk more about that as we go through the presentation. So the concept that I mentioned it before, it's called tracing success patterns. This is essentially the boot camp version of persuasion. I went to the Air Force Academy. The first 6 weeks, it's boot camp. They call it basic cadet training. People are yelling at you. You're learning how to put on your uniform, how to march, how to do the basics. That's really what this conversation today is about, is learning to do the basics, getting those skills that will allow you to begin to understand the other more refined elements of persuasion, or even the many ways in which you can use these initial 7 versions of persuasion. These are drawn from a book by Cialdini, Robert Cialdini. He's a Stanford professor, PhD. He kind of wrote the Bible on persuasion. Now, obviously, persuasion's been around forever, but his book, Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion, began to put some science around it. And through my, I knew how to get people to change my diaper when I was a little baby, and I was certainly effective at different levels of persuasion. I was a middle child, so I had 2 older brothers, 5 and 6 years older than me, and a sister 3 years younger than me. So a lot of times middle children become kind of the mediator in the family, because we have to kind of bring together those 2 sides. And so I began to learn some of the skills of persuasion just through that process, and that evolved over time. I mean, when I got into business, I kind of began to learn some of the sales tactics. When I started to raise money, by that time I knew enough so that I could convince people to invest in what I was doing. So I was developing these persuasion skills. I didn't know the names of them, though, and I didn't know really the science behind them. And so that was really what was revolutionary for me when I read Cialdini's book for the first time. It was like, wow, there's a science to this, and I can actually get good at it. and know why I'm good at it, and then finally get to the point where I can add to the state of the art in persuasion and invent techniques that are my own. So, and that's some of those I'll be sharing with you today. So why listen to me? Well, I've started 32 companies, 25 fail completely, losing my money and all the investors' money. The successes, like any good narcissist, I put only the successes on my website. So, but in all of those, so through that process, I learned the success patterns and the failure patterns. And the reason I call the masterclass Tracing Success Patterns is that, if you can just find someone else who's been successful, and especially if they've been successful multiple times, then you can sort of trace what they did, and then you can get, more than likely you'll get the same kind of end result to that. My brother, when I was growing up, he's 5 years older than me. He was like an amazing artist. Did amazingly well in school, physics. He was always taking things apart, putting them back together. Basically, I got the feel of what it would be like to be Leonardo da Vinci's younger brother. And so I just basically wanted to be like him and follow what he was doing. And he was a painter, and he did these amazing paintings. And so I'm in sixth grade, and I think, I can't draw at all. I'm terrible at that. So I found a book with a picture of a horse in it, and then I got out the paper that I had, and I was able to trace the outline of a horse and kind of make my picture by tracing. And I just wanted some praise from my mom, so I showed it to my mom. She was very, oh, you can draw just like your older brother Gary. So to me, I kind of learned that there's a way to kind of finagle your way and take a shortcut to getting good at something, as opposed to either having natural talent or years of practice. You could just find someone else who'd been successful and trace what they've done. And so that's what I've tried to do, and that's been effective for me. So that's one reason to listen, is I've really studied the space. The other reason is that I have some track record of actually being able to do it. So getting Bill to invest $1 million, getting Jeff Bezos to buy 10% of my company for 16 million shares of Amazon. That's $3 billion worth today. And then getting Steve Jobs to go from wanting to sue us to actually wanting to partner us in the area of graphical user interface. So those are some reasons. I also have been where you are at the beginning, where you didn't really know that much about a subject. You have a natural skill, because no one gets to this stage of life without being good at persuasion. But maybe you want to get to that next level. And so I've listened to a lot of people, including my sons. These are my sons on the left here. They basically said, okay, Dad, you need to relax more. So I wanted to kind of just mimic what they were doing. And I think that's another good skill to develop, is the ability to mimic and follow those success patterns. So let's talk about what we're going to cover today, and also some of the reasons to stick to the end. So I'm going to go through these stories of persuading, Gates, Bezos, and Jobs to give me what I needed. And then there's a master class. This is kind of the introduction to it, but there's a detailed version of it, and there's a workbook that comes along with that. And that's something that at the end if you stick to the end, I'll give you access to that workbook. There's also a gym system guide. That's another presentation. If you're involved in a startup or looking to raise money for your own startup or for a nonprofit, then there's lots of good information in there. I've created something I call the 50K per month wealth creation matrix, which is really just a way of thinking through, if you do decide to do a startup, or if you just want to earn additional funds, kind of what the key is to do that. These books that you see listed here, books and video, one of them is a video. These are foundational materials for what you're going to hear today, and they're this one, How to Give a Great Demo, that's one that I'm working on. That's a book that I'm working on. If ChatGPT gets a little bit better, I'll be able to finish the book. The rest are just things that have made an enormous difference in my career, and we'll touch on some of them. And then finally, there'll be an offer at the end to get a lowering of the Altura Academy tuition and the value, and also some of the gym system stuff, which would normally be valued at $10,000 for just $500. So now, before I get into the meat of the presentation, if you could just write down on a piece of paper how long you intend to stay, from 10 minutes to 90 minutes, or, until Lee gets tired of talking, because I would like to double my ability to get what I want. So this is a little survey. If I had this in person, I'd have you just kind of hand it out, and you fill it out, and then you can show everyone else what you decided to pick. I hope that you've checked the last box. And that's, it hurts my feelings if someone leaves at like the 10-minute or 20-minute point. So please stick around. I know you're going to receive value, because this is a presentation that has worked many times before in the past. So let's get into it. So psychology tells us that there's something called the fake and real because. This is from Cialdini. This is the a test, and Cialdini, being a scientist, essentially used the behavioral science kind of principles of let's get a group of people and do an experiment and see what happens. And they were trying to figure out if it is it really true that humans keep these shortcuts for thinking inside their head. Their theory was that people don't want to conserve energy in their brain, and they don't have time to figure everything out rationally. And so as soon as they get a clue as to what's going to happen next, then they can say, oh, okay, I know the end of that. And so this is a movie that came out. I was getting ready to go to the Air Force Academy when this movie came out, 1977, right before I started boot camp. And it was Star Wars. And so there was a huge line around the block. It was interesting to me looking at this picture. There's almost no women in that line. So it's clearly appealing to young men. I was perfect target demographic. And the very fact that there was that long line there, would have probably got my attention and made me maybe pull over and decide, hey, I should go to this movie, even though I don't know what it is, just because of the social proof of all of those people standing in line. But that wasn't what Cialdini wanted to test. What he wanted to test was the power of persuasion of a single word. And so what he did was he had someone come up and go to the person in the front of the line and say, hey, can I cut in line? And now that almost never worked because there's a lot of social pressure. Everyone else behind you in the line has been standing there. They don't want to see people just cutting in the line in front of them. It's not culturally appropriate to allow that to happen. So almost no one says yes to that. It is kind of cheating in a way. So the second thing, they said, okay, we kind of expected that. Let's send someone up. And here's what they said. They said, can I cut in line because my 10-year-old daughter got ahead of me and I'm worried about her being in the lobby alone. Now that's called a real because, and almost everyone let the person cut in line because whatever that social pressure was, the empathy of, hey, this guy needs to make sure his daughter's safe was enough to convince them to let them cut in line. And then as it shows there, they said, okay, well, let's try this one more time. And this time the person came up and said, can I cut in line because I'd like to be at this spot in line. So that is different, right? I mean, that's a fake because no additional information has been added. There's no logical reason a person should say yes to that. It's really no different than that number one choice of can I cut in line. The difference is that it used that word because. And because is a magic persuasion word. And it works because the humans maintain this set of shortcuts in their thinking. So as soon as that word is mentioned, people tend to not listen to the rest of the sentence or the rest of the request. They just said, oh, the person has a reason, I should probably say yes. And so that's a persuasion technique that works in many different ways. I've now, once I've heard about this, almost all my emails end when I'm requesting something, or even just to be nice so that they'll pay attention to it. I'll say, I hope we're able to have a next meeting because it would be amazing to have a chance to share with you, what I've taught about persuasion. And so that word because is just a special word that you can use in lots of different ways. That single word is frankly enough for you to double your ability to get what you need. If you're not actively using that word today, that'll change everything for you. Okay, so let's talk about how the story of why Bill Gates invested in and how that persuasion story worked. And I'll mention some of the persuasion techniques after we get through the story. So I had I was working on this startup like any entrepreneur. I needed funding, and so I didn't have any customers, no traction, no revenue. Barely the beginnings of an MVP in terms of a prototype form. So really, I didn't have much at all, but I did have a meeting with Bill Gates. So that was great. So I walk into his office in 1997, and he sees me. He's kind of leaning back in his chair, and he says, "Okay, go ahead and have a seat." So he set me down across the table, and he said, "So tell me about your startup." He was ready to get right to business. And so now a lot of people who come into Bill Gates' office, many of whom wanted to ask for money, would have started talking at that point in time. That was not what I did. Instead, what I did was I reached into my bag and I pulled out this encyclopedia thick book and it essentially had a listing for 15,000 catalogs in the country. And what I did with the book is I just dropped it on the table. Hadn't said a word yet. And so that is about attention. So Bill Gates leaned forward. So now I had his attention because I'd done something different than anyone else who'd ever walked into his office, which is not get into this asking mode, but get into this telling mode of dropping something he doesn't really understand, but now he's curious about. Bill's a naturally curious guy. So he reads on that. Now I'd actually written on the side of the book 15,000 catalogs. I wrote that in like blue marker. This is white here, but and I wrote $100 billion in revenue on the other side, and I spun the book around so he could kind of see both sides of that. And he says, "Oh, okay." He's intrigued, but in his head, he's thinking, "Yeah, but why does it matter to me? Because, I'm the CEO of the world's largest software company. I've heard about e-commerce. I know that Amazon is out there selling, but we don't want to, maybe we'll sell some of our software online, but what does this catalog thing have to do with me?" And so then I pulled out the laptop and showed him the one cart checkout system. This is what I had the patent on. And it's the basic idea is that you could go to a website and you could buy from several different merchants, put it in your cart and check out. Now you've heard of that because Amazon uses that to power 2/3 of all of their sales. We used the company I was starting with shop.com, and so we had invented that. And so Bill Gates, now he starts leaning forward. Now, so as I'm describing this, he's beginning to see the implications of, oh my gosh, someone's going to get 100 billion plus revenue as these catalogs move online because it's inefficient to go to every website. It's going to be much more efficient to have a two-sided e-commerce marketplace, and that's what we had invented. So now, I've gotten his attention, right, with the dropping of the book, and now I've done the visualization. That's that second step. And I've established a need. Now he's interested because he cares about money and would like to be a part of that. And there's a way to satisfy that need, which is what I was getting ready to do next. So, we have basically attention, visualization, need, satisfaction, and now he's preparing for the ask. And so it was at this point that he stopped me and he just basically stopped rocking. He was rocking this whole time once he'd seen it, because that's a good sign. That's how he was processing stuff. So he's rocking. And he stops right there and he says, "Well, what about the fact that," and he asked me this question, and it was really a trap question. He was trying to get me to not know something so that basically then he would just drill down, and it would have been a bad meeting after that. And so what he asked me was, well, what about inventory? If you put all these catalogs online, you're not going to have, unless you have real-time feed to all their back ends, you're not going to know their inventory. It's not going to work. And so because I had studied the system, I pulled out a fact, which was that 38% of all catalog orders were done by people filling out the mail order forms, not calling the 1-800 number. And then I said, that means that the catalog companies have to have enough inventory, because if I want the red sweater and I fill that out and I send that in, they either have it or they have a system where they can call me back at that time and say, "Hey, Lee, there's no red sweater. You're going to have to buy the blue sweater." So they have a solution for that. Now that answer was so specific, and this was called the appeal to authority. Essentially, I was the expert in this space, and I knew that if I'd have just said a lot of orders are done by mail order, that would not have convinced Bill of anything. But I said 38% of all orders are done that way. That specificity meant to him, oh, Lee has really studied this already. The other aspects of authority that are important are essentially credibility, which kind of established there, and trustworthiness. And so I had known Bill from prior companies. They had tried to hire me twice there, and I'd worked on another successful company by that time and got this very nice thank you letter from Bill. So I had established a lot of authority before I walked in that door. Doesn't mean he would have invested if I hadn't done that. But because I was able to appeal to authority at the end, then yeah, he said, "Yeah, I'd like to invest." And 15 minutes later, I walked out with $1 million, almost figuratively, but just about. And he invested personally, not with Microsoft's money. So I'm proud of that. So that's the story of persuasion. Those were the steps of persuasion, and that was one of those techniques that I showed you on this slide up here of these Cialdini, the first set of techniques there. Authority, appeal to authority. So you see that. So actually, there was also a perceptual contrast aspect of that too, because I was very different from everyone else that walks into his office. No one had ever dropped a book like that onto his desk. There's a little bit of social proof in the sense that all of these catalogers are all done in a certain way, and they're likely to move together. So if we can get some, then the rest will move. Scarcity was definitely in play because there's only so much money that we were going to raise at that point in time. So he could either buy 5% of the company or someone else would buy 5% of the company, because that's all we were selling at that time. And so there, the reciprocity was also in play because since I'd known him for a number of years, I'd send an email a year for the people at Microsoft that helped us out. And I would, unlike the yes men around him, I would say, here's the things that I think Microsoft did wrong that year and some suggestions on how they could have done them better. So there's a lot of giving that I had done that I was looking for that reciprocity. And, I think there was some liking. I mean, my my boyish good looks and charm were, I'm sure, an element to why he liked me. But the key point here is that you can get a number of the way to get what you need really is to do the things listed on this slide. So the first one, tracing success patterns. So you're going to hear a lot of ways to be successful with getting what you need. And if you just follow those, you're going to at least double what your effectiveness. There's also certain key phrases. We already talked about one of them, which is the because. That's a magic persuasion word. And there's other ones that you're going to learn, which will help disarm those naysayers as soon as they start showing up in a meeting or start speaking up in a meeting. And then there's a way to use these persuasion techniques. It's not just about getting, making more money or whatever, but they really apply across your entire life to getting what you need in relationships as well. So let's go through some of these persuasion techniques. The first one, perceptual contrast. So essentially, the brain doesn't have a subjective way, an objective way of measuring things. It's almost always subjective. And that means you can influence it by what you show it right before, what it experiences right before. Cialdini talks about if you're in a cold, air-conditioned building and you walk out into a warm day, you're going to think it's actually hotter than if you walked out of just a house without air conditioning. You just walked out. It's that contrast from the cold to the hot. The example I usually use is this one, which is if I want to make you think a basketball is heavy, I give you a ping pong ball first, then I give you the basketball. It'll feel like it's made of lead. If I want to make you think it's light, then I'll give you the bowling ball first and then the basketball. Then it feels like it's helium. It'll float to the top. And that's really just so basically you can control people's reaction to things by the order in which you deliver them. So the guy Scott Adams who writes the Dilbert cartoon, he's an expert in persuasion, and he talks a lot about that. And this is one of the cartoons that he did on that subject. So here's the boss: "You're fired." "Oh, not really. But now this 2% raise won't seem so bad." And then he walks back and says, "Well, this job is all about managing expectations." And so it's just a classic little example of the use of persuasion, the persuasion technique of perceptual contrast. This is another one. I won't bother reading all this to you, but I will send this presentation to you when we get done, if you make it to the end. And it's about this girl at college who has some bad news to tell her parents. So there's examples of this perceptual contrast usage all over the place. So there's a lot of you have maybe bought a car. There's a technique that realtors do where they show you the kind of junky house that you probably wouldn't want, but they put it on their list to show you, and it's overpriced. And then they maybe show you another one like that, maybe, and then they take you to the one that they really think you might want to buy. And all of a sudden, because it's not junky, it looks really good, and because the price is lower, it looks like a great bargain, and now you're much more likely to buy the house. There's another aspect of perceptual contrast that's used in situations where you spend a lot of money, then it doesn't seem so bad to spend a little money afterwards. So you buy this $40,000 car, and they say, "Oh, well, for just $1,000 more, you get the sound system." Now, if you had gone separately to buy the sound system for instance, after you already owned the car a couple weeks later, there's no way you'd pay $1,000 for like a nice radio and speakers. But because it's sort of sold at the same time in this kind of add-on stocking stuffer mode, you're willing to pay more than things are really worth. And of course, the discount illusion is always there. We see this all the time in retail where people are showing a higher price. No, with that price X'd out, and then here's the deal, and you save this amount. So let's do this. Let's do this for your products. I'll show you an example of how we can apply these principles of perceptual contrast in the development of a price list. So if you have a product that you sell, then go ahead and fill in on a sheet of paper that you have there the target price, or maybe a product you're thinking of buying or some hypothetical example. But try to think of something realistic that you would sell for the realistic price that you would want to make for that product. And then just on the same sheet of paper, just write 2 times that number, and then write 4 times that number, and then write a number that's 6 to 12 times that number. 10 is the easiest math to do, but whatever you want, somewhere between 6 to 12 times that number. So those are your tier three, tier two, and tier one prices. So in my case, my target price before I started, in essence, if I wasn't using these persuasion principles, my target price for one of the services that I offer is $2,500. So two times is 5K, four times is 10K, 12 times is 30K. So those are my tier three, tier two, tier one prices. The reason we're doing this is because I want to have a system where you can make more than your current target price. In fact, you can make your 2x target price. And so that's what I've created here. This is, talking about inventing the multi-vendor shopping cart. This is my invention of a new style of price list. Now, what makes it new? Everyone else who does three-tiered price lists, they do it in the order of like their bronze, silver, gold, their home version, their business, small, medium business, and then their enterprise version. So they're always going low price, medium price, high price. So the problem with that is they're missing out on the opportunity to leverage perceptual contrast. And perceptual contrast would do it this way. So my price is 30K, 10K, 5K. So that 30K column is what I want to talk about first. So this is a system for raising money, guaranteed to raise the money. So it's 30K per month. Now this would be probably what you would use if you're looking to raise $1 million to $5 million. It's a minimum of 5 months that we guarantee we can raise that money. We'll have at least $1 million raised within the 5 months. And then if we don't make that, then we get 100% money back guarantee. And so that's the service, is essentially to help people do that. Now the reason this works, so $30,000 is more than anyone on the planet charges for a fundraising service. And so but price is a proxy for value. And so people think, wow, this is 30K for this solution. I could probably I can't afford it, but I mean, this must be the best in the world. It's like looking at a Lamborghini or something like that. It's some amazing car. It's $250,000. Well, that's a lot for a car. I can't afford it, but that'd be cool to own that car. But then there's another part to it, which is the money back guarantee. So in addition to it costing a lot, 30K, he also offers a 100% money back guarantee after 5 months. So you mean I pay my money, but if I don't have $1 million in the bank at the end of 5 months at least, then he just gives me everything back. Wow, this stuff, not only does it cost a lot, I get that, it's the best in the planet, but it's 100% money back guarantee. So if it didn't work, then he couldn't stay in business. So it's the best in the planet, and it really works. That's a lot of heavy lifting from a persuasion point of view for just one column of this price list to deliver. Now, let's go on. The next thing I would always talk about is tier three pricing. Everyone knows there's some price in the middle. So I go to the tier three price. It's $5,000 per month. Now you can, and 3 months, 15K. So this is the value of perceptual contrast. I've made $5,000 seem like a small number. Now remember that $5,000, my tier three price, is twice what I want to get. And that's twice what my target price is. Twice what I would have probably gotten if I had just put $2,500 for my price, if I didn't understand this price. I call this persuasion-based price list. That's the name of the invention. If I didn't understand the persuasion-based price list, I'd probably be getting $2,500. Now, by deploying this, I'm going to get 5K for this product. I guarantee it's a 250K raise within that period of time. And if I don't make it, then it's a lower percentage money back guarantee, 50%. But notice that if in 3 months I give them the 50% return, I'm still making 7,500, which is 2,500 per month. So even if they took the money back guarantee, I would still make my target price. So this is kind of magical, right? Because this persuasion price list makes people value what I'm doing, happy to pay a lower price than what the top end people pay, and guaranteeing that even if I'm not successful in the relationship and they don't renew into a subsequent month, or we don't hit the target, that I'm still going to make my 2,500. So these are powerful techniques. The one other thing that I will say on the pricing side, and I'm spending time on here, I know we're about, I'm spending time on this slide because almost everyone hates the sales process. They don't want to state the price. If I was building websites and I was selling a website for $500 or whatever, and I get to that point where I'm just about ready to mention $500, and the person, I'm thinking, and then one of the customers says, "Oh, my cousin builds websites. He's only 18 years or 13 years old, and he does it in his website, and he'll charge me $20 for it." So that's called a slap across the face. That's something you'll learn in the Wally video. That's a very painful experience when someone challenges you on price in a really aggressive way, right, like that. And so it makes you want to price your product just a little bit above the level at which you'll make your business will work. And when you do that, you're cutting off your margin, which makes it much more likely that your business will fail. And so what you want to do instead is price your product very high, so you establish price as a proxy value, you establish value, but then give people a way of paying less, but still more than you would expect. And that's the genius. He says modestly, that's the genius of the persuasion-based price list. So let's go on from this structure to kind of like other examples of that same exact thing, but just applied in a different area. So I have a mediation service that I offer. I call it the Two Summit System. Notice that I call this the Two Summit System, and this I call the GEM system. This is something you'll learn from the 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, which is that you have to be the only person in the world who sells what you sell. That way it's much easier. You're not in a crowded market. And so even though there are other fundraising services, none offer what I offer in the GEM system, stands for Growth, Engagement, Monetization. So the easiest way to be the only one on the planet selling what you sell is to just tack the word system on the end of it. You have to sort of organize it that way as well. So basically you're licensing the system. We're not selling a service. It's a monthly license. So here I have a similar kind of thing now this is basically a mediation service. But I don't call it, Lee's mediation or something like that. I call it the Two Summit System. And the idea is to make it visual, where most of the time people are who are fighting over one thing, like who's going to get to the top of the mountain first. So what I do in my approach is just create two mountains. And now we can have two winners, and it makes the whole mediation process simpler. So that's what that means. Now, how did I price it? So essentially, here the hourly rate is $2,500 per hour, maximum day rate of 15K. These are my tier one prices. They have to pay an upfront deposit, and if there's no settlement, now this is unique in the entire world. There's no mediation service that says if there's no settlement, you're going to get a 100% money back guarantee. And I also created another thing, which was that I wanted them to be able to pay me more money. If I'm going to spend a day or a couple of days or a week with them, I believe that they're going to be happy with the work and happy when working with me, and they're going to get a settlement where both sides are going to get their top summit. And so and I want to capture some revenue from that happiness. So there's a discretionary bonus that I put on the price list that they can pay me twice what they paid me through the whole deal, or at least up to that if they're happy, but only if both parties are happy. And so that's the high bar that I've set for myself in this program. So that's tier one. So now, even though their deal may not be, maybe some dispute under 100K over here at tier three, they're knowing they're getting the same person that works on these $1+ million deals. So that's my tier one pricing. Again, you know the game now. So over here, the single issue, smaller deal structure, there are things that, here you get 6 hours free consulting before you start. Here you only get 2 hours. So you want to have different a la carte aspects or get some things fewer in the tier three than you get in the tier one, just like a lower money back guarantee is only 50%. That sort of explains why the tiers exist. But so if we work together individually and you want to double your average revenue per user, that's one of the types of the persuasion-based price list. We can guarantee you can double your revenue per user within just a short number of months. And at tier three, we at least a 25% lift. So when we talk about is this worth more than $5,000 per month to have access to this service? If you're doubling the amount of revenue that you're getting just by using this persuasion-based price list, then that's clearly going to be a lot more than $5,000. Okay, so all of that was just about perceptual contrast. I try to give a lot of examples and a lot of detail there because it gives you a sense of just how rich these persuasion principles are and how far they can go. I'm going to speed up a little bit. I listen to Audible at 2x speed, so we're going to speed up a little bit as we go here. But you're going to get all of the presentation material at the end. So if you want to come back and check in on things, and you'll also have the opportunity to not pay me $5,000, but $500 to get access to a group class related to this. And in that group class, we'll also have one-on-one time where I can work with you, come alongside you to kind of leverage this Gatling gun. I've got a Gatling gun. Most people have spears in this persuasion thing, and I can leverage that Gatling gun to help you get what you need. So the next level, reciprocity. So give first to get back later, because social obligations create compliance. So we've all been at a dinner table where there's a little bit of a fight over the check. It's kind of like a courtesy thing. Everyone should try, at least for a while, to pay for the meal. What that does, though, in a business setting is you're creating a social obligation. So the other night I was at dinner, and at the end of the dinner, the guy reached for and to pay the bill, and I said, no, 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 let me get it. And he said, no, you've spent a lot of time in the meal teaching us about persuasion and the persuasion-based price list. And so I accepted the fact that he had that he would pay the bill. So I had given first, and then he didn't want to be under obligation to me, so he instead paid the bill so that he could immediately balance out that obligation. Now, I don't think it was quite fair in the sense that I had given a lot, and in terms of probably $5,000 worth of time with him, teaching him about persuasion-based price list, and he had paid for, maybe a $100 meal or whatever. And so, but he was very effective, and I have to give him credit because he didn't let me get out of that meal. If I had paid and I had given all of that, that would have been two gifts that he now owes me for, in a way. Reciprocity. The culture is what causes this. Everything is, the skids are greased if we just operate in this way. Now, remember I talked about how these techniques can be used for good or for evil. And so here's an example. I call this the middle picture here. I call this the creepy guy. So we've got the creepy guy at the bar. We've got the woman at the bar, and he comes up and he says, "Hey, I'll buy a drink for you." Now, she has a couple choices here, right? So she could say no, and that's a possibility. Or she could say, yeah, go ahead and buy me the drink. Now, if she says yes to purchasing, to letting him buy the drink, he's now created a social obligation. And the thing with con men is that they'll often start with a gift, and in essence, a fairly low value gift in comparison to what they want or what they ultimately expect to have from the transaction. So he buys this woman a gift. Now, because he's the creepy guy, he may be expecting a lot more than 20 minutes conversation with this person. And so now, if he keeps buying her drinks, then this may lead to a bad deal for the women involved. Yeah, I mean, my daughter-in-law, I hope I have a granddaughter who needs to learn these lessons about persuasion, and so I hope her mom teaches her that you can't just take these gifts and do nothing about it. You can accept the gift, but the way to balance it out so that there is no internal social pressure to comply that the con man can take advantage of is you have to give a similar gift back. And so if she said, "Well, thanks so much for buying my drink. Let me buy the next one," and now she's balanced the scale. She's not going to feel any social pressure the next time you ask her for something. And so that's one way to do it. And it doesn't have to be in the same way. So when when the guy's buying the drink, she can establish the value of the drink and what's going to be done in return. Oh yeah, it'll be great if you can buy the drink. I only have 30 minutes to talk, but I'd be happy to chat with you for 30 minutes while we have this nice drink together. So now she's again balanced out the equation as opposed to letting him get too much social pressure on top of that. Other uses of it, you could view this as the next one. Charities will sometimes send you a dollar bill in the mail. And that dollar bill has the power of, they've given you a gift. And what are you going to do with the dollar bill? You have to have to spend it. You're not going to send it back to them. And so somebody say, oh, okay, I'll read the letter. So they paid you a dollar to read the letter at least. But then towards the end, it says, well, this is a worthy cause, send me $50 or whatever. And they found that when you send this gift along with it, the compliance or the desire of people to actually follow through and give those gifts is much, much higher. So the basic universal rule is that we return favors, and if you don't, then you're essentially an ingrate, and it's a lot of social pressure to not be that type of person. There's a way that this gets used in combination with perceptual contrast during a negotiation is in the area of reciprocal concessions. And so if you essentially, this is the concession effect, if you ask a lot and you say, okay, I want $100,000 I want $1 million for my house. And then you say, well, but I'll take 800K. All of a sudden that person who's offering, maybe they offered 700K. And then, but you've come down, now they have to come up. So that reciprocal concession approach is really part of perceptual contrast and reciprocity. Free samples, that's another example. The address labels is another charity gimmick that's done. They send you personalized address labels. Now these have no use other than for you because it even has your name and address on it. So you kind of have to accept the gift, and you probably aren't going to throw away. There used to, by the way, I have to always caveat this. There used to be something called envelopes that you sent in the mail, and they had address labels that you put in the return address. I've realized that all my examples are like from the 1980s, so I've got to upgrade a little bit. But anyway, those are all examples of reciprocity. Now let me tell you a kind of a different way of using reciprocity to gain a level of viral growth that would be surprising to, I think, most people. So when I was CEO of Shop.com, I was there for 9 years, and we got 500,000 users onto our site. That was after 9 years, we finally took money from not people out of the circle of trust, but from a VC. There's a rule that VCs have. It's never too early to replace the founders. So I lasted about 9 months after that, after 9 years. But I felt good. 9 years, 500,000 users. I'm patting myself on the back. And I quit the company and started a company with my son who just graduated from college. And so as we were working on that new company, Facebook had just come up with their platform where you could write apps on top of Facebook and take advantage of all the people that were already on Facebook to have your app grow. And so there was a company that added not they added 500,000 users in 9 hours. So remember, I'd done 500,000 users in 9 years. They did it in 9 hours. So I said, okay, something has changed in the world of software distribution that could even happen. And so what I said to my son is, let's create an app on Facebook, see if we can get something to grow like that. And so he came up with this idea of a birthday calendar, and we'd show 2 pages of the calendar with people's birthdays on it. Now, Facebook had a feature, it still has it to this day, where they give you a message essentially on the day that it's someone's birthday to say, hey, your friend Jim, it's his birthday, go write something on his wall, or that's what you used to do it, or just post a message, and that would let Jim know that you cared about him because you mentioned his birthday on his birthday. But what we said was, it would be cool if, at least for your top friends, you can't do it for all your friends, but for your top friends, that you could maybe get a message in 2 weeks ahead of time in front of their birthday. They say, hey, their birthday's coming up. That'd give you time to plan a party or buy a gift or whatever. So that was the core idea of the birthday calendar app, was that we would give you a warning. We give you you could look ahead, or you could get a message to see whose birthday was coming. So how did we make this grow? So what we did was, when you were installing the app, we had you basically name the top 10 friends that you had that you wanted to get these 2-week advance notice of. And so once we did that, then we were able to, in Facebook, to send out a message on your behalf to all of those 10 friends, to each of those 10 friends. And it said something like, Jim, Lee has chosen you as one of his top 10 friends because he wants to receive an alert 2 weeks before your birthday. If you want to receive an alert before Lee's birthday, click here to install the birthday calendar app and choose him as one of your top 10 friends. Okay, so I think you can all see the reciprocity, social obligation weight that is on Jim right now. He has a couple of choices. He can ignore this, so he's basically the ingrate then, or he can accept it. And those are really the two choices. If he accepts it, then he starts to install the birthday calendar app. And before he can use the app, and before he even sees really the 2 calendars or any of that, he has to name his 10 friends. And so the virality happened before the usage of the app. We've all heard of refer a friend. You use the app for a while, you really like it. Oh, maybe you want to refer it to your friends. That almost never works. There's so much, all of the momentum to starting to use an app is during that initial onboarding. So you want to put those things that are the heaviest lift during the onboarding. And in this case, you want to tie that viral hook of getting 10 people that might want to use the app. You want to tie that to an actual feature of the app, so essentially, if you have your app and you can design a feature which requires multiple people to take advantage of that feature, then you can get the kind of viral hook. So this approach added 2 million users in 14 days. Not a single bit of advertising. There were 40 million people on Facebook at the time. That's 5% of the entire install base of Facebook had this app on their system within 2 weeks. So 2 million in 2 weeks. That's the promise of just one idea that we're talking about here, the idea of reciprocity. So the next idea, I'll take a quick drink here. We want what we can't have. So, obviously all the Beanie Baby type experiences where everyone wants to get them as soon as they get in the store. That really super cool car that you've dreamed about, you'd really do a lot to try to get that car. And even the wealthiest people in the world will pay a lot to get that car because there's only one of them. These people discovered it's called the last Leonardo, the last Da Vinci. It's basically a Leonardo da Vinci painting. It's still questionable whether it was really by him, but there's I think it was a Saudi prince that bought it for $450 million. I think no painting of Leonardo's that ever sold for maybe more than 25 or 50 million. So all because there was competition to get it, and the other people wanted it, and he wanted to have the last Da Vinci. So then we have, obviously, every time in fashion, there's some new type of fashion comes out. So we got the Sydney Sweeney jeans or whoever. And just because they sell out, they become desirable. And so now how do I get the thing that's sold out? Same thing like with jeans in Russia in the 1970s and 80s. People wanted American jeans because it was hard to get. That lack of availability is what brings people to the table. So let's see some examples of that. So when the new Coke was released, everyone wanted the classic Coke. The best way to really get someone motivated, well, I don't know if the best way, but it's one of the ways, is to take away something they already have. That's when you get a revolution. You know, if you have some rights and then you get them taken away, that's when those are, it's time to fight, basically. At least if it's like rights that are like freedom of speech, taxation without representation. I mean, those are the kinds of things that really get people motivated, is when they have the asset and then have it taken away. There's not just scarcity in terms of the item. There's a beef importer and like buying beef for their, I don't know, their city or state or whatever. And if they knew that the beef from the other country was going to be scarce, that they had, they didn't have as much to deliver over the next number of months, then they'd order twice as much just to have. That's kind of a logical, rational decision. But if it was scarce and you told them, look, you're the only people in the state that know this, then they would order 6 times as much. And so, because the information was scarce as well. And then the area of auctions, there's only one winner. They call it a winner of an auction. When in a way, you can think of it the other way, which is that it's really the loser of the auction, right? Because you paid more for something than anyone else on the planet thinks it's worth. And so that's a weird way to describe a winner. An example of this was when my son was in third grade. They had a fundraising thing in the school that they did, where they had all the kids make like a clay plate. Well, they made one clay plate for the whole class, and every kid put their handprints on it, and then with glaze, they put their like initials by it. And so this is a big plate that one of the parents would probably like to buy and own. And so they said, oh well, let's do this auction style. And so the parents started bidding, $10, $50, $100, and it started to go up. And it ended up being kind of a war between two of the parents. Now, I'm not going to say who one of the parents was, but this other parent, every time she would bid, the other person would bid, and she would bid. It got up to $2,000 for this plate. Now, this is starting to create an issue because the teachers could realize, look, if we let someone win, one of these two women win, then that's going to create some ill will. And so the teacher said, well, it's clear that both of you really want it. Why don't we let you both win? You can pay the last bid amount, and we'll have the kids make a second one, and so you can each have their own. Now, obviously, if they had made 30 of these and there's 30 parents, maybe the parents would have paid $10 for it or $20 for it. But the scarcity is what made it go to such a high price. And by taking even from one item to two items, it limited the scarcity so everyone could walk away, or at least the two key people could walk away a winner. So scarcity is super powerful. You see it all the time in different persuasion techniques. The one I'm going to talk about here related to Jeff Bezos is, why would Jeff Bezos possibly invest $3 billion worth of Amazon stock in shop.com? Now, when he actually invested it, it was in 2001. It was $5 million worth of Amazon stock, but if I'd have held on to it, I didn't, unfortunately. Anyway, I always need a time machine to go back to kind of make a different decision then. But anyway, it was a very, even at the time, I mean, conceptually, the stock had that value. It just hadn't. We weren't, 25 years later when everyone could see the value. It had that worth, I guess, is the right way to say it. So fear and greed. Those can be used to drive people to act. And we talked before about these 5 steps in persuasion: attention, visualization, need, satisfaction, call to action. So I needed to get, so I didn't know Bill ahead of time. I knew, I'm sorry, I said Bill. I didn't know Jeff Bezos ahead of time. I knew Bill Gates ahead of time, obviously, but I didn't know Jeff. But he had found out about what we were doing, and he invited us up to kind of like talk to him. And we were excited, we wanted to see if we could offer them something they didn't have. And what they didn't have was a multi-vendor shopping cart that worked with all of these different third-party merchants, and they were just selling book, music, video, and we had perfected the ability to do that across merchants. We're probably 3 or 4 years ahead of where they were. And so obviously we gave them a demo of our app. That's the attention part. We'll let them visualize it. But they don't really need our application. I mean, they have their own e-commerce site. But what we said was, well, what if we could just reskin our site and we showed some of their book products, and we showed our experience and how you could jump from buying just their products to buying like products from Sharper Image or some other merchant. So that was interesting to them. But then I just happened to, because we had built it anyway, was I showed them another site, which was our technology, our one cart fixed price shopping site with, I think it was at that time like 1,500 merchants, 10 million products, in combination with eBay, which had, I think, 2 million sellers on eBay. But all those products were variable price, auction based site. And so we said, well, one of the other ways to use what we built here at shop.com was to build a site for eBay that combines those things. Now, at that instant in time, Jeff got up from the table, he called Owen Benata, and they walked off into the corner of their boardroom and they chatted for like less than a minute. And then they come back and Bill, I keep saying Bill, Jeff sat down and he said, okay, what do you want? And I said, well, I want $5 million. And so he said, okay, we'll give you X number of shares. It's $855,000, 855,000 shares of Amazon stock in order to own 10% of the company. Now, what I didn't know at the time was he didn't really care that much about owning 10% of the company. What he cared about was the other thing he asked for, which is right of first refusal. So that meant that if anyone ever came along to buy us, then Amazon would have a right to match that price. And that was why this showing the fear of eBay buying us and Amazon not having a chance to match the price. That was the fear part. So it wasn't the greed was not, hey, you can sell more products because you have all these fixed price products on Amazon. It was the fear motivator that was really there. But in a way, it was all about scarcity, because there was only one multi-vendor shopping cart that worked the way ours did, and someone was going to gain access to it. Either we can keep it ourselves or someone would acquire us. And they just wanted to make sure that they had the only one cart shopping system that was viable on the market. So they couldn't let they wanted to retain that one and only position, which is scarcity. Alrighty, so authority. We got about 30 minutes left to go. I appreciate everyone's attention. We'll press on here. So authority is we follow those people who know what they're doing. And if they know what they're doing, they typically have certain symbols of authority. So obviously we have all the symbols of authority here on the left-hand side, a gun, a police uniform, the way he looks, clean shaven, etc. And so we're very likely, if that person tells us to pull over in traffic or to stop, we're very likely to do it. Now, this other guy on the right, he has essentially a different uniform, and his uniform is basically sharing. This might be someone who I would want to help, but it's not someone who I'm going to pay attention to with respect to traffic laws. And so that's how authority works, is you need to have symbols of authority. And if you do that correctly, they will really help you take a shortcut in terms of how you decide what to do. You need these cues, because otherwise, if we had to get out a piece of, okay, can you show me your ID and prove to me that you're a cop and not just some guy standing on the corner, that wouldn't really work. And so we want these cues that shape our behavior. And we also use authority as a decision shortcut. So when someone is leading us, they did a test where they had a guy who was dressed in a three-piece suit, and then a guy who was just, like a tourist dressed in tennis shoes and shorts or whatever. And they would try to get people to jaywalk across the street. And so when the guy who was dressed nicely jaywalked, more people were willing to follow him in jaywalking across the street versus when some randomly dressed person was not there. Remember back to the Bill Gates story where I talked about the appeal to authority or principle of authority. That's expertise. So I had all of those things, and trustworthiness. And when you put those two things together, you're almost it's very, very difficult to resist the authority method of persuasion. So one example that I do when I give the same or a longer version, I guess I would say, uh, of a multi-class version of this same presentation, where we really drill down into each of these persuasion principles. And one of the things that I give as an example there is I say, okay, imagine that you looked in the yellow pages. Actually, let's say not yellow pages. Let's say you looked on, you did a Google search, and you do a Google search, you get the name of a place, you go to that place across town, you walk in, there's a waiting room, there's people dressed in nice uniforms there, and then they have you fill out some forms, and they bring you back to a room, and there's nice diplomas on the wall, and then this guy walks in with a stethoscope, and he tells you to take off your clothes. Now, you're actually likely to do that. And whereas if someone just randomly did that exact same thing, but didn't give you that whole um, symbol of authority, repeated symbols of authority, then the chance that you would comply with that would be very low. And so that's a lot of power assigned to, and you can see how con men use this. Everyone's probably seen a movie where the con men set up a fake office with fake people, or not fake people, but people sitting in the chairs to make it look like they're bigger than they are. And it's all really just a con job to make you think that you should do business with them. Celebrity endorsements, that's a short form version of this. Airline pilot, this is an interesting case because if we walk onto a plane and the airline pilot, who's a very high status individual, he's going to be responsible for getting you safely to your destination. If they were just wearing, random civilian clothes, you would probably be a little hesitant to just continue on into that plane and let them take you there. And then you've probably also heard in sometimes fair amount of times the airline pilot gets on the intercom and announces that, okay, today we are flying with Sally and Bill and Judy, and those are the stewards in the cabin that'll be with you. They're responsible for your safety, just like I am, and I'd like you to make sure you pay attention to them and their directions, because it's important for us as we move, as we fly to Pittsburgh or whatever. So that's what's very interesting about that, is that you can have a person who has natural authority like that, or the authority they've earned by their uniform and their fact they're sitting in the cockpit, and they can actually convey that authority to other people. And this happens also just, when they say, okay, I'm going to ask the people in the exit row to follow my commands, and that you're going to basically help me get people off this plane officially. So there's basically anointing us with this authority to be the exit row folks. So it's really interesting how authority can be used and transferred from one person to another. Authority is also important in other situations. We're going to talk here about the time we interacted with Steve Jobs. So there's a lot of different ways to deal with persuasion, getting what you need, conflict resolution, just any type of situation where there's two people that want different things. Um, and these are listed here. They're, as when I teach the in-person class, we talk about, one of the first things we do as kind of an icebreaker is I ask people, when was the last time you were in a physical fight? And for some people, they've never been in a physical fight. Some people it was like in grade school. Some people that have more interesting lives, it was like, in college or even after that. And so that's a type of a conflict. And so there's a lot of different ways to deal with that type of conflict. Obviously walking away, that's probably the wisest way if it's going to be a physical altercation, unless your safety's or those you love's safety is involved. It's still not but before you sort of jump to number 6 there, self-help, where you just start throwing punches, it might be better to use some of these other techniques. So negotiation, if that's a way to people talking, it's usually constrained by time, power, and knowledge. That really influences how effective you're going to be in your negotiation. If it always feels like to you that the other person, time is on their side, they've got the power, they've got the knowledge, then there are ways of combating that, and that's what these persuasion techniques are all about, is to shift that around. So there's a famous book called Getting to Yes, and he talks about that as if it's very difficult to overcome those things, but there is a way to do it. So that's what we're learning here, really. Mediation, I mentioned that before. That's something I do. That's where there's a person in the middle who kind of is an expert negotiator and can kind of see both sides and help the two parties work towards a resolution, but only if they agree to it. And then arbitration is when there's a person who actually has legal authority to force the agreement. So almost exactly like mediation, but one party, the person can say, okay, I've listed both sides. Here's what you're going to do. And then litigation, that's kind of a worst case for most things. That's how to become a profit center for two lawyers, is to go into litigation. There, the court will basically be the source of power to enforce whatever the decision is, to determine the decision and enforce it, the jury and the legal system. We've talked about self-help, requesting help. I learned all of this at Pepperdine. I took a course there called Mediating the Litigated Case, and there were like 40 lawyers in the course and two business people, and there are all these competitive negotiation games that they played essentially. And the two business people, we just ran circles around all the lawyers, because the lawyers, they want to fight versus solve. And in business people, we really want to not to fight because that's expensive, but to solve. And solve meaning, get both parties to say yes, move on to the next thing. So let me talk a little bit about how this came up in the when I was working at Digital Research, and we had invented one of the very early graphical user interfaces. Actually, invented is not the right word. We stole it from Xerox, and Steve Jobs had stolen it from Xerox, and Bill Gates had stolen it from Xerox, and that's where we had Macintosh and Windows. And the version that I worked on was something called GEMS, Graphic Environment Manager in this case. And so we'd done this product, came out a little bit after the Macintosh. And the ad that they were running was the picture on the left-hand side. They only had a black and white. There was no color Macintoshes at the time. And so when we launched on the IBM PC, we did a color version. And so we had our version of Gem Paint. They had Mac Paint. And so we ran an ad that just showed ours that just said hi. And hi is obviously even friendlier than hello. And this really upset Steve Jobs at Apple. He could not stand the fact that we had sort of leapfrogged where the Macintosh was in the personal computer domain, which had a lot of other advantages that, just from running DOS and all the applications that were there that weren't even graphical applications. So he sent his lawyers and Guy Kawasaki and a number of other folks from Apple, Jean-Louis Gasset. They all came to Digital Research, and we sat in the room together, and they were basically there to tell us that we had to change everything about Gem, because we had a desktop in the corner, a trash can in the corner, and the same desktop. Of course, we'd all gotten the ideas from Xerox, but the lawyer, I guess on the way down, Guy Kawasaki tells this story in a very interesting little video, and his point of his story is that a good technique to know is bluffing, and something called the big bluff. And in reality, I think that's not usually a very effective technique, and it usually doesn't last very long. And when the bluff is figured out, then you've created a really big enemy in that process. And but their concept was that when they arrived, the lawyer, who knew that there was no such thing as a proprietary windowing system because Xerox had given up all the rights to that, he knew all that, but he came out all guns blazing saying, you've totally ripped us off. This trash can shouldn't be here, blah, blah, blah. And, the people in the room, including myself, we weren't the decision makers at Digital Research. Gary Kildall, who was the CEO and founder of it, he was the decision maker, but he wasn't there. And so we listened, and we knew that there was a list of demands that they had for us to do to kind of, which would have changed the whole user experience in a bad way. No trash can, no drop-down menus. A bunch of things that they wanted us to change. And so what we did was, if we think back to like this conflict here, we couldn't really walk away. That would be, we lose our market if we just changed everything. So we tried to negotiate when they were there, but it didn't really work. They weren't going to go into mediation or arbitration. There might have been a lawsuit. That's what they were threatening. Self-help, we weren't going to go and, protest that, this violation of user interface, or throw rocks at the Apple facility, or whatever would be the self-help ways of proceeding. So what did we do? We requested help. This was through an appeal to a higher authority. And so what we did was we went to our CEO and said, "Hey, they're trying to sue us and they're threatening us in this way." And he said, "Oh, I'll take care of it." And so he went and talked to Steve, and basically Steve said, "Okay, we're not going to sue you. In fact, we ought to look for a way to partner with you." So what did he tell Steve? He told Steve, he goes, "Hey, you remember that in the Apple II days we did something called the CPM card and we licensed you the operating system to use it. Remember our decision at that point in time that we weren't going to sue each other over IP issues?" And Steve said, "Oh yeah." And so all of a sudden we had turned, because that this is an example of knowledge and relationship, actually, because Gary Kildall had essentially knowledge about the relationship that we didn't have. He was able to basically to back Steve off. Now, ultimately, Steve did partner with folks to essentially help do a color version. And actually, it was much later. They had a Color Max at the time, but they didn't have anything that ran on the PC. So they worked with a team to get that. Some of the same team that worked on Gem for the desktop. So next thing, scarcity. I mean, sorry, consistency. So we are what we say and do. So, this is this I hadn't heard this example before, but we really, in a sense, it's propaganda, but for a good cause. We try to influence our children to love America and to say pledge allegiance to the flag and to be patriotic and to honor, the founding fathers and all of those things that we try to do. However, when because that happens year over year, they stay consistent, hopefully, with that. And so when it comes time to recruit people or you can't, entice them to join the military, it's a voluntary military now, there's no draft. They're essentially remembering those days of, okay, I love America, I want to serve America, I'm ready to fight for America. So again, an example of how consistency over many years can influence behavior. The basic concept of consistency is that you can leverage this from a persuasion point of view by working on small yeses, getting to a bigger yes. So when you're trying to set up a meeting with a customer that you want to sell something to, it's like, would you mind reviewing our ad? Would you mind taking our survey? Would you mind booking a meeting? Would you mind, if booking a second meeting? Would you mind if I send you the contract review? Would you mind, doing the DocuSign? So we're working through a series of yeses, and those first yeses it's kind of like the snowball rolling down the hill. They get the momentum building for the rest of it. So now we talk about making commitments stick. We'll give you an example of that in a minute. So we have, the reservation script. So people want to be consistent what they themselves have verbalized. So there were a lot of restaurants that were having trouble with no-shows, and they tell people, it's like, would you please call us if you're not gonna show up, because then we'll be able to get the table to someone else, and that'll help us out. And about 30% of the people would not show up, and they would not call. And so that was a problem. And so they added just 2 words to the script. They said, "Will you please call if you need to cancel?" And then they paused. And if you're on the phone and someone asks you, "Will you please call if you need to cancel?" you're going to say yes. And so once they added that, now that person would be consistent, so that either they would show up, or they would call if they were not going to show up. All because of those two words. It's just a little way of getting someone consistent, a little action that they can take to be consistent with that. Onboarding procedures, we've talked about if someone's taking a survey on the street, and they can get you to basically take the survey into your own hands, read the form, check the boxes, flip the page over, sign the petition, flip the page over, agree to volunteer. So all of those things are helping the onboarding thing. Consistency, we don't want to lose. This is gamification that Duolingo does. If you've done this for 3 days in a row, you really want to do it a 4th day in a row. Apparently, there's people that have like 4,000 days in a row that they've done Duolingo, and they definitely want to hold on to that consistency. And so it's 11:30 at night in New York City, and they'll go out of the bar and they'll go do a Duolingo lesson just so that they don't lose their streak. A lot of power in consistency, and can be applied in a number of different ways. So I plan to stay at least. So I use this principle. I think we've held basically everyone here. So thank you. We're getting close to the end. You've lasted the whole time, and that's the principle of consistency. Now, that principle would have worked better if, in addition to using the word because, if I would have made it actually written. I couldn't see that you'd actually written it down. In person, I would have been able to see that. And if you'd have had to hold it up to the rest of the people in the room, and maybe you had picked 30 minutes and everyone else had picked 90 minutes or until Lee finishes, then there might have been pressure to change that. So, but it has to be uncoerced. So you want the person to really believe what they're checking. So the next principle, social proof. When in doubt, look around. So, Netflix uses this. There's a bazillion people. They've got the top 10 shows this week in terms of by number of views. And so, oh, I didn't even care about Batman, but it's number one show. Maybe I'll watch it just because of that social proof. Same thing with a restaurant with a line outside. You're definitely going to go to this one and not this one that doesn't have any people at it. It's very efficient to let other people give you the clues as to what you should do, and then you can follow their lead. You especially follow their lead if there's either a lot of them or they're similar to you in some way. So if you're at a football field or a football game and hundreds of people start heading for the exits, you don't have to know what might be wrong. You're going to just, oh, there must be something wrong. I'm heading for the exits. And then if there's an example where all of the men are going somewhere, and you're one of the men in the audience, and you say, wow, these people are like me, I better go with them. It just basically is a way of getting people to take the next step because of what other people are doing. Their example in the call to action in an infomercial, when they tested it with saying operators are waiting, then there was a certain level of return. But if you said, if operators are busy, please call again. So what that did basically was say, wow, this must be really valuable and important and offer, because so many people are calling in that the operator's busy. Now, they didn't say the operators are busy. They said, if the operators are busy, please call again. But it sent that signal that there was a lot of people that wanted this. We talked about the Netflix thing. Really, every site that shows the number of views of something, is a type of social proof that, hey, it's worth my time to watch this video because it's super popular, TikTok, whatever it might be. Phase fundraising chart. This is a class. I use this with all of the startups that I'm working with to help them manage the ask. We show who's investing. That's social proof. We have nice round valuation numbers that are nice multiples of one another. If I invest here, 2x, 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 5x, raise a standard amount of money, and then show what's going to be done. That's use of proceeds. These are like 4 slides in the normal pitch deck are all combined into the last slide. And then we show how many investment slots are available. So as it turns out, when you start combining all these persuasion techniques, you get something ultra effective. I mentioned before the persuasion-based price list is one of my inventions. This is another invention, the phase fundraising chart. No one in Silicon Valley or any of the accelerators does it this way. And it's important because I work with companies with very little to no traction. And that's where, you do this 32 times on your own companies and now 50 plus times with third-party companies raising money when you have no product, no customers, no revenue, no profits. You need a technique that works. And this is the technique that works, called the phase fundraising chart. So there's a lot of elements to it. So showing all the rounds, past, present, future, that's a persuasion technique called thinking past the sale. You see this in car dealerships when they're selling you a convertible. They don't talk about the convertible features. They talk about you driving along the beach with your girlfriend sitting next to you with her hair blowing in the wind. That's all about the future state of owning this product instead of the current state. Stepwise valuation, that's perceptual contrast. The fake real, because when we talk about the use of proceeds, we're going to raise this money and we're going to do these things because we completed those things. We're going to step the valuation up here, get some more money, do some more things. Because we completed those things, we step up. So you get credibility because. Tight date range, time constraints. We show the investors in each round, showing the investors in the prior round. No one does that. If this was the current round, you can see these have invested in the prior round, and these invested in this round, which validates this which is validation of the valuation. And so these are all woven into how this persuasion-based price list work. The social proof is an example of that. Candor, trust, humor. And that the candor, trust, and humor are all about getting someone to like you. We say yes to people that we like. So part of my goal in this presentation is to get you to like me, because then you're more likely to say yes. So it works because it's probably obvious why this works. We want to please people that we like, and we trust people that we like, and if we can connect with people that we like, through something that we have in common, then that's a way of building that, getting people to like us. So if we both wore the same team jersey or both had the same interest, if we were in a sales situation, you like golf, I like golf, we might talk about that. That builds liking. If I praise you, you're going to like me more. Praise is the one technique that works always, and it's even when it's insincere. But it's nice if you can actually find something to praise the other person about that you really do believe. Getting people to like you. This is people will do. This is the one sentence persuasion course. So you could listen to me for 90 minutes. Or you could read this course. It's a very particular kind of persuasion that's used on very large scale in very large scale situations. Religions, cults, politics. It's a lot of situations like that, but products too. It says people will do anything for those who, basically they'll like people. People will do anything for those who encourage their dreams, justify their failures, allay their fears, confirm their suspicions, and help them throw rocks at their enemies. So let me give you an example, and this isn't intended to be political. You know, we all know about the Mar-a-Lago man. This is a cartoon. It's not by Scott Adams, by someone else. It's called The Mouth That Roared, The Mystic Musings of the Mar-a-Lago Man. And so this was all done before the 2016 election. And so no matter what you think of Trump, we have to give him his due that he's very persuasive. He got elected twice, and the second time after, an event that would have been disqualifying for anyone else on the planet. So we have to give him his due. He's very persuasive. So why is he so persuasive? Well, he uses Miracle Max. That's one of the other characters in the strip. Presidential victory formula. It says one sentence persuasion that people will do anything for those who encourage their dreams, justify their failures, allay their fears, confirm their suspicions, and help them throw rocks at the enemy. So how was that done? So, okay, we will win again, encourage their dreams, justify their failures. China stole your jobs. Allay their fears. We will destroy ISIS. Confirm their suspicions. Immigrants that are at fault, and then help them throw rocks at the enemy, at their enemies. The media and the elites are losers, and obviously that was basically the formula, at least one view of the formula that in 2016. So this is a very effective technique to use, and you don't have to do all of these in one example like I did there, but it is most effective if you do. So this may have been a little, as they say, fire hose presentation. So let me ask you a question. Would you like to have this continue beyond this call? I would love it to continue beyond this call. Obviously, I'm giving you all this material, and I'll send it to you after the presentation so you can do it yourself, but it'd be a lot more fun to do it together. And so if you go to this altura.net/academy page, and you can sign up to attend the group classes. The price list, now you're all fully trained on price lists. You would imagine that I would have a 3-tier price list. So it's $2,500 per month. You get only four people per class, get 8 hours of one-on-one coaching during the month. It's normally $2,500 per hour is what I charge when I'm doing pure 1-hour consulting. So quite expensive. And then, but 100% money back guarantee. So if you don't renew into the second month, you'll have had a free month's worth of a lot of one-on-one contact on whatever your issues are. And if you don't decide to go forward with the next month, then I just send you your money back. And then on the other end of the spectrum, tier 3, it's 24 people in the class. It is a group class though, where we can all see each other's faces, and if you want to ask specific questions, and we can workshop your ideas and your challenges in front of the group, and you can listen to other people and learn from that as well. And then in addition to that, there's 1 hour of individual coaching as well. And then there's no money back in that case, but it's worth the $500 for sure. Now, what I want to do today is that even though I do want you guys to sign up, there's a button. There's a button on the website, which I'll show in just a sec, to do that. But if you do sign up today for this tier 3, I'll extend the 100% money back guarantee even for tier 3. So we work together for a month. You pay me the $500, put on your credit card for easy payments, however you want to do it. And then if after a month of that you don't like what you heard, then I'll just send it back. And more than that, you remember this $100 that I was going to give you here. So in addition to your $500 back, I'll send you an additional $100 back, because I know that if we work together for a month, you're going to want to work together for a second month. And you can just ask for a full refund or whatever portion of refund you want. So I think I'll go back and kind of finish up where we started. I think you'll agree that after all of this, there is a huge opportunity here to more than double your effectiveness. You know, there's a cost to it. It's not $5,000. It's not $2,500. It's $500 with a money back guarantee plus an additional $100. So I hope you'll join me in that. Okay, so what I've done is I've gone over to the Altura.net site and clicked on the Altura Academy. So we have information about what that's about. And then these are the price lists that we just looked at. And then right below that is the tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. So if you're interested in tier 3, just click buy tier 3 and you go to a site, you can put in your credit card and off you go. I really appreciate everyone being here.